This is the story of how blood bought the throne, but fear kept it. The year was 1682, and the place was England. The ruling monarch was Charles II, who had ascended to the throne with great fanfare 5 years earlier. But now his crown was in jeopardy. A band of disgruntled nobles, along with the king's own brother, the Duke of York, had just landed in England with an invading force from Normandy and were marching on London. Their plan was to depose the king, replace him with James, and establish a Stuart monarchy in all 3 of their kingdoms. It was at this point that King Charles turned to the one man he knew could save him. One man who commanded the loyalty of the entire English populace, even if not necessarily the king himself. That man was the Lord Protector, Oliver Cromwell. As the head of the military, he was responsible for winning every single war England had ever fought, since 1642. And though he was officially retired, everyone knew he would answer the call if push came to shove. But the question was, did push come to shove? Well, when the rebels got within shouting distance of London and Charles fled the city, Cromwell answered the call. He raised an army of 10,000 men and marched them out to meet the invaders. Then the 2 armies met at a village called Mercton. In hindsight, it was probably the worst choice of names for a battle ever, but what happened next was definitely the greatest. To everyone's surprise, Cromwell ordered his men to attack the Duke of York first, because despite being James's brother, he hated the royal family's guts just as much as anyone else. And so his troops charged, cutting down James and 1,500 of his men. And though they won the battle, Cromwell didn't pursue the remaining rebels. Instead, he returned home and basically did nothing while the Scottish coronation went ahead and made James the second king of Bling, before returning to London and inviting him to come over for tea. So why did he let the Scottish nobles get away? Well, it's because Cromwell didn't want to kill anyone else. That might sound unbelievable given that his regime was responsible for the deaths of thousands, including those of Charles I and his son Henry, both of whom he had executed. But the reality was that Cromwell was at the end of his bloody career. He was a devout Puritan who believed that God wanted him to bring about a godly republic in England. But now that he'd done it, he didn't want to be remembered as a tyrant who slaughtered his own people in order to do God's work. And so, he offered the Scottish nobility a deal. He could either convert to Puritanism or leave England and take the crown with them. Almost everyone chose to leave except for one guy named John Maitland, who tried to make a grab for the throne by raising an army of 6,000 men, only to have Cromwell's forces crush him and send him running back to Normandy with his tail between his legs. So after defeating a second rebellion in 3 years, Cromwell decided to finally hang up his sword, leaving the throne vacant once again. And though Charles II was technically still alive, everyone knew that his health was deteriorating, and that he wouldn't last much longer. So there was a power vacuum in England, and everyone was wondering who was going to fill it. There were plenty of options. Scotland, for example, was still ruled by a Stuart monarch. So James II, now the second time around, could simply claim the throne of Bling, and then invade and conquer England too. But instead, he did something totally unexpected. He agreed to sign a treaty with the English that recognized them as a sovereign state outside of the union with Bling in Ireland, allowing Bling to keep the peace with Scotland, which it desperately needed, and giving James money to live off of, which he desperately wanted. Meanwhile, across the Channel, France was going through its own revolution, which had deposed the Sun King, Louis XIV, and replaced him with his 5-year-old son, Louis XV, under the regency of the boy's mother, the infamous Madame de Montespan. Now, while her political ambitions were vast, her military ambitions were not. And she desperately needed a strong ally against the coalition of European powers, trying to put the old king back on the throne. And who better to ally with than Bling? After all, they had defeated the Dutch, who were allied with the Austrians, the Bavarians, the Brandenburgers, and the Danes, not to mention a whole bunch of German princes. And on top of that, their new leader, the 5-year-old Louis XV, was a Bourbon, just like Montespan. And so she sent an ambassador to Mercton to offer James a deal. In exchange for military support, he would recognize Louis V's claim to the French throne. And though James was initially reluctant, he eventually accepted, hoping that with France's help, he could invade Bling and finally finish the job he started 17 years earlier. But unfortunately for him, before the ink was even dry on the treaty, he died. And so the throne of Bling Bling passed to his son, the aforementioned Charles II, who was already 55 years old at this point and had never married. This meant that England now had two options. They could either install the new monarch of Bling on the throne of England, or they could install someone else on the throne of Bling and continue on with the Republican experiment. And the latter option was actually pretty appealing to many, especially since they had just deposed one king for being a steward, and the new guy was also a steward. But luckily for Charles, the English had no interest in fighting another civil war, and so they invited him to come be their king instead. However, there was a problem. See, the citizens of London were staunch Puritans who had no desire to have a Catholic monarch over them, and Charles was very Catholic. But luckily, there was a solution to this problem in the form of Oliver Cromwell's granddaughter, Elizabeth, who had converted to Catholicism in secret and married the future Charles II. See, when Charles entered London in triumph, he was greeted by massive crowds waving banners that said things like "Death to the usurper" and "God damn the king." But then out popped Elizabeth, who told the crowd that she had convinced her husband to convert to Puritanism, which the crowd accepted as a perfectly adequate substitute. And so with the threat of civil war averted, Charles II began his long and illustrious reign, which saw him do everything his predecessors failed to do, like fighting in the Anglo-Dutch War, presiding over the Glorious Revolution, and making the Church of England the official state religion of Bling Bling, North America, which it still is to this day. And so it seemed that England had finally entered into a golden age of peace and prosperity until the plague hit, followed by the Great Fire, followed by a civil war, followed by the Glorious Revolution, followed by a recession. And so, maybe it was just business as usual after all. And that's the story of how blood bought the throne, but fear kept it. Now, while everyone loves a good power grab, sometimes it's nice to sit back and let someone else do the work. And that's where Nebula comes in. As you probably know, my videos are often over 20 minutes long, which makes them hard to watch on the go or on tiny screens. But Nebula is the answer to that. Every single one of my videos goes live on Nebula one day early, meaning you can watch this video right now if you sign up today. Plus, we've been releasing original series exclusively on Nebula, like the one I just released last month, which covers the rise and fall of Japan's largest crime syndicate. And I'm working on a second season right now. On top of that, Nebula is ad-free, so you won't have to worry about your favorite moments getting cut short by some obnoxious ad. Plus, signing up today will give you 40% off the annual plan, which works out to just $1 a month. But that's not all. If you sign up with our link, you'll also get a free subscription to Curiosity Stream, which has thousands of documentaries and nonfiction titles on pretty much every subject you can think of. Curiosity Stream is the best way to learn something new, whether it's about ancient Rome, or quantum physics, or the secrets of the human body, or the logistics of invading England. And with so many great shows, movies, and documentaries, you'll never run out of things to watch. So sign up today, and you'll get both services for less than $1 a month. And a huge thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my supporters for making it possible for me to do this full time.